My ship broke through the oceans, batting waves apart. It flew its sails full of wind, and sailors toiling on the oars. A scared mouse, when near a predator, gains a mammoth burst in speed. So did my galleys as they fled the Cyclops Island. Only when the island was out of sight did they stop rowing, letting one of the wind gods carry them further. The men let up and breathed heavily, for they were exhausted. Only I remained, steering the ship with one mighty oar. For 2 days we traveled peacefully. The oceans were so calm as to allow travel, but not still, and the ship continued on its course home. The men were too preoccupied with escaping to question my judgment back then, and now time had alleviated their wounds. Tales were already spreading of men that outswam the mountain thrown at us, and even those suggesting that people engaged with the Cyclops in hand-to-hand combat survived. However, by the third day, the seas exploded in waves. The sky turned dark and water poured out. The seas below rebelled against the ships and tried to knock their ships off like a horse would fight against an owner that it does not condone. The herder of the seas, Poseidon, had heard his son's cry and came to punish us. The storm did not last long, but in it we lost our position and the way we were going, for we were too busy fighting the ocean. Waters raged for a day and a half. On the following morn, as fog dissipated from the ocean, we saw an island just a few minutes' travel away. On it was a ship, and I assumed it one of ours, scattered by the storm. It was washed up, almost half its hull on the island. The waves had battered it against shore, and I navigated my ship landward so as I could help them. When I arrived at the beach, however, I saw no men working on pushing the ship back to sea. In fact, I saw no men at all. A section of the crew came down from my ship onto the island, but the ship already on the island was deserted. A road led away from the beach. During the storm, the road turned to mud and now held deep imprints of the feet, tracks of men. I followed them and motioned my crew to move with me. They were hesitant at first, but eventually they had no choice but to follow me. Fog soon grew out of the surrounding forest and covered the road by which we came. A man could not see 5 paces in front of himself. It was not until I was in front of a house that I noticed that we were out of the forest. I walked into the house, but no one was there. As I stepped outside, I saw a shadow sitting in the fog. I walked up to the stranger and made conversation to him, for it perplexed me that he had not come out and greeted us. "Who are you, stranger, and what island is this?" The man made no reply. He sat next to a table outside, a pot of water next to him. His head was cocked to one side. I stepped toward him, and the figure fell to the floor. The eyes were rolled back towards his skull, and his skin lifeless. My sailor Epaphras kneeled down and closed the man's eyes. All over the town, the crew was finding similar pictures. Men were still in their daily lives, even as they were gone from our world. Epaphras looked to me, his face a grimace of fear and revulsion. "Let us go back to our ships. There is no more value here, only death." "Fear not the dead man, Epaphras. We need to find out what happened to this village." Never one of my men called to me. I came over to by his voice to find that he had found a new set of tracks. They led up the mountain to the top of the island. After we buried the dead of a village, we followed the tracks, and I noted a strange smell arose from the ground here. As we climbed higher and higher, the smell grew stronger. Brown-eyed track finder Demianos finally gave way. "I can hold no longer, Odysseus. Let us turn back." "Ha! Is that what I hear from one of us that defeated a Cyclops? This is no match for us." And even so, the smell was intoxicating now. I was concentrated on the air that I almost overstepped the ledge. The mountain dropped into a crater, a thick liquid at the bottom. I looked down and saw a bubble rise up to the top. A bit higher, higher, and it burst. I was almost thrown back by the smell. It was that of rotten eggs, of rotten flesh, but stronger than ever. Demianos dropped to his knees and fainted. Before I had the chance to hold him back, he fell off the cliff edge, plummeting to his doom. Epaphras gasped at this, and turned blue as he inhaled the air. I picked him up and ran down the mountain. Others of my crew were running after me, some carrying others and some absent fallen. Epaphras screamed, shrieked, and kicked himself off me. "The eyes! The eyes! Don't stare at me! Let me go!" He crawled to the side of the mountain and fell down, out of my sight. My eyes darted around, looking for the meaning to his words, and then I saw them. Millions of them looked me over, closed on me. Men were crying and screaming all over. I pushed on, though the urge to jump off and end this pain was tremendous. The fog was heavy, wet, and treacherous. I combed it apart, swimming as I ran. I dived at the beach and made my way toward the sea to my ship. Not many had followed me. The cold sea water refreshed me, and I spat and coughed on the deck, the crew looking at me perplexed. "Set sail," I ordered. "Set sail for Aeolia Island." "But, sire," Eurylochus asked, "where are those men that left with you?" I answered not, for I had no answer.
There sat Odysseus, troubled still after 2 days of having left that wretched land which took several of his crewmates. It seems that our hero has reached his limits. If one more drop of sorrow or anguish falls upon him, then nothing but death remains.
"Weary Odysseus, there seems to be land up ahead."
Just as those words met Odysseus' ears, his depression faded, as the morning mist when confronted with the withering heat of the sun.
"This I must see for myself, dear Ephyros. Oh, and take note that when the time comes, mounds as majestic as gods themselves shall be made to commemorate our fallen comrades."
A gloomy feeling swept through the boat after the mentioning of their deceased crewmates. Although that feeling of sadness could be no more, for their captain was prepared to disembark once more.
"Get all the men on deck, lower the sails, and prepare to drop the anchor."
Steadily, the men poured out of the seemingly small ship, only to find dense vegetation. They passed through a zigzag of trees in the forest, and there it was, a majestic lake to the eyes of the explorers. But for these weary men, it just meant it was time to head back to the ship. But no, the valiant Odysseus would not stand for returning to their ship without good reason, for he was an adventurer, and if there was a lake in his way, it was his duty to continue on and find a way through it.
"Men, we shall build a raft. There's enough wood around us. Make haste, for time is of essence."
Logs were flying about, going from one man to the next, fitting together to build this raft. Once their labor was finished, the time to board the raft began. When the last man was on the raft, a surge of water sent them flying towards what seemed as a new island in the middle of the lake. There they saw a dimly lit house, and as one they treaded towards this building, only to find that when they reached it, there was no house, but in its stead there was a woman.
"What is your name, woman? What is your purpose here, on this forsaken land?"
Soon enough, the woman replied,
"I am but the Maiden of Riddles."
As Odysseus stared intently at her, he couldn't bear a straight thought, for he was engulfed by the maiden's beauty. Her velvet black hair and black tunic trapped his mind until she spoke once again.
"Dear traveler, if you have any hope for returning to your homeland, a riddle you must solve. I shall make this short. What occurs once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in an hour?"
And with her last words, she vanished. As he began thinking about the answer, his men ate the food and drinks left out by the maiden. For days, Odysseus remained there waiting for the answer to come to him, until one day it came to him. As swift as a snake, he leapt to his feet and called for the maiden.
"O fair maiden, I figured out your riddle. The answer is the letter M."
From the heavens came a loud shriek, and all his men and him were back on his ship. Not willing to wait for another moment, they set sail, as quickly as their human hands let them. For who knows whether the maiden would go back on her word and send them back to the island, and let them stay there until their death, without ever seeing their dear Ithaca again.
Bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum. Why are you clearly? Just be like, no! You look.
Do I?
Talk a bit about what you think.
This movie sucks.
I question the sanity of this group.
These actors made the movie, not me. My directing skills were not what made this amazing production. It was but all their effort. Thank you very much. Especially Sharona.